Welcome, brave souls, to a world where the shadows tell stories and the walls keep secrets. Tonight, we venture into the chilling realm of haunted houses, where the ordinary turns sinister and the unexplained comes alive. These are not just ghostly tales or urban legends. They're the true accounts of terror that have left witnesses trembling and skeptics questioning their beliefs. From footsteps in empty hallways to eerie whispers in the dead of night, these stories will take you beyond the veil of the living and into the heart of the unknown. So dim the lights, hold on tight, and prepare yourself, because once you step into these haunted houses, there's no turning back. Are you ready to face the fear? Let's begin. Story: The Shadows of Blackthorn Manor. Blackthorn Manor stood at the edge of the small town of Ravenshallow, surrounded by an aura of unease. For decades, it had been abandoned, its once majestic structure now cloaked in ivy and decay. Locals whispered of a curse, claiming the house itself was alive, feeding on those brave or foolish enough to enter its halls. One chilly autumn evening, a group of friends decided to test the legend. Among them were Ethan, the skeptic, Clara, the history enthusiast, Jake, the thrill-seeker, and Lily, who had always felt drawn to the manor for reasons she couldn't explain. Armed with flashlights and a single camera, they ventured into the foreboding estate just as the sun dipped below the horizon. As they crossed the rusted iron gate, an unnatural stillness enveloped them. The crunch of their footsteps on the overgrown path seemed deafening against the oppressive silence. The front door, heavy and cracked, groaned open with a sound that echoed through the night. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of something rotten. The grand foyer, with its cracked marble floors and a chandelier hanging precariously, hinted at the house's former glory. But the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if the house was aware of their presence. Clara pointed to a faded family portrait above the fireplace. A solemn man, a pale woman, and a little girl clutching a doll. "That's the Blackthorn family," she whispered. "Legend says the father went mad and killed them all before disappearing, but his body was never found." Suddenly, Jake's flashlight flickered, and a cold draft swept through the room. "Probably just the wind," Ethan said, though his voice lacked conviction. They moved deeper into the house, finding themselves in a narrow hallway lined with doors. Each door seemed to lead to a new layer of unease. A dining room where plates were still set as if expecting guests, a library filled with books whose pages had been ripped out, and a nursery where a single rocking horse moved gently, though no one had touched it. In one corner of the nursery, Lily froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The group fell silent, and faintly, they all heard it, the soft giggle of a child. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Let's just keep moving," Jake said, his voice shaking. But as they turned to leave, the nursery door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Ethan yanked at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, and the giggling turned into sobs. Clara shone her flashlight toward the rocking horse, and there, sitting on it, was the doll from the portrait. Its glassy eyes seemed to follow them, and a single word was carved into its wooden chest: "Leave." Panic set in. They banged on the door, screamed for help, but the house seemed to absorb their cries. Then, Lily noticed something horrifying. The doll was no longer on the rocking horse. "Where is it?" she stammered. Before anyone could answer, the sobs turned into a guttural scream, and the room plunged into darkness. A faint light appeared at the far end of the hallway, visible through the nursery window. "The stairs," Clara whispered. "We need to get to the stairs." The door flew open on its own, and they sprinted into the hallway, the sound of footsteps chasing them, though none of them looked back. They found the staircase, but the steps seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning in impossible ways. The light at the end of the hall grew brighter, revealing the figure of the man from the portrait. His eyes burned with fury, and in his hands he held an axe dripping with blood. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice boomed, shaking the walls. Ethan tripped, and the figure lunged. Jake grabbed his arm, pulling him up, and they continued running, finally bursting through a door into the cold night air. The friends collapsed on the lawn, gasping for breath. When they turned to look at the house, it was silent and still, as if nothing had happened. But the front door was now closed, and in the window of the nursery, the little girl's face stared back at them, her doll clutched tightly in her arms. The group never spoke of that night again, but Lily began dreaming of Blackthorn Manor every night. In her dreams, the little girl whispered one haunting phrase, "You can leave the house, but it never leaves you." Story House of Whispers. Nestled in the dense woods of Holleridge stood an ancient house, its stone walls weathered by centuries. Locals called it the House of Whispers for reasons few dared to explain. Some claimed it was cursed, others believed it was a gateway to something darker. One thing was certain: no one who entered Holleridge House ever came out the same. The last known owners were the Grayson family, who vanished in 1925 without a trace. Ever since, the house sat abandoned, yet strange occurrences plagued the area. Hunters reported hearing voices calling their names, and hikers claimed to see flickering candlelight through the windows at night. In the fall of 2019, a group of urban explorers, Mia, Kevin, Rachel, and Tom, decided to investigate the infamous Holleridge House. They were seasoned adventurers, used to exploring creepy, abandoned places, but something about this house felt different. The moment they crossed the threshold, they felt it. The heavy, suffocating air, as if the house itself was breathing. The entry hall was grand but decayed. A massive staircase wound up into the darkness, and cobwebs stretched like veils across the once opulent chandeliers. The faint smell of burnt wood lingered, though there were no signs of fire damage. Mia noticed a peculiar detail. Every surface, from the walls to the furniture, was inscribed with faint carvings. They were symbols, strange and intricate, unlike anything she'd ever seen. "What do you think these mean?" she asked. Kevin, the skeptic of the group, laughed nervously. "Probably just some graffiti from other thrill seekers. Let's keep going." As they explored, the house seemed to shift. Rooms they entered didn't appear the same when they tried to leave. A door that led to the kitchen moments before now opened into a sitting room with decaying furniture and shattered mirrors. In one of the mirrors, Rachel swore she saw movement. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "See what?" Tom replied. There was a face, a woman's face, right there in the mirror. Before anyone could respond, a loud thud echoed from above, followed by the sound of footsteps. "Is someone else here?" Kevin whispered, his bravado fading. "Let's go check," Mia said, though her voice wavered. They climbed the creaking staircase, their flashlights casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. At the top of the stairs, they found a long hallway lined with doors. Each door was slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of the rooms beyond. One contained an old rocking chair that swayed slowly, though there was no breeze. Another had a crib, its bars clawed as if by something desperate to escape. At the end of the hall was a large ornate door. Unlike the others, it was tightly shut. Rachel hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't." Before she could finish, the door creaked open on its own. Inside was a bedroom, eerily well preserved compared to the rest of the house. A four-poster bed stood in the center, its velvet curtains drawn back. On the nightstand was an open diary, its pages blank except for the most recent entry. "They won't let us leave. We are theirs now." The door slammed shut behind them, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breaths fogged the air as a low whisper filled the space, unintelligible but insistent. "What is that?" Tom shouted, spinning in circles. Suddenly, the bed's curtains snapped shut, and the room was plunged into darkness. The whispering grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. Mia's flashlight flickered, then died, leaving them in complete blackness. A chilling laugh echoed, and Rachel screamed, "Something's here! It's right next to me!" Kevin fumbled with his flashlight, finally getting it to work. The beam landed on the bed, where the curtains had parted again. A figure sat upright on the bed, a woman in a tattered gown, her face pale and gaunt, with hollow black eyes that seemed to pierce through them. "You shouldn't have come," she hissed, her voice a guttural rasp. The group bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The woman rose from the bed, her movements jerky and unnatural, as if she were a puppet being controlled. She reached out a hand, her long, claw-like fingers scraping against the air. "Run!" Mia screamed, and with a sudden burst of adrenaline, Kevin kicked the door open. They barreled down the hallway, the whispers now a deafening roar. The house seemed to shift around them, the walls closing in, the floor buckling beneath their feet. When they finally reached the front door, they threw it open and tumbled onto the lawn. The house loomed behind them, silent and still once more, as if nothing had happened. But the nightmare wasn't over. In the weeks that followed, each of them experienced terrifying visions. Doors slamming in their homes, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, and whispers that called their names. Rachel was the first to disappear, followed by Tom. Mia and Kevin tried to warn others, but their warnings went unheeded. The last time anyone saw Mia, she was standing at the edge of the Hollow Ridge property, staring at the house with empty eyes. Locals say, if you stand near Hollow Ridge House on a quiet night, you can still hear the whispers of the explorers, trapped forever within its walls. Story: The Tragedy of Wingate House. On the outskirts of a sleepy New England town stood Wingate House, a sprawling Victorian mansion cloaked in mystery. Built in the late 1800s by industrialist Samuel Wingate, the house was meant to be a gift for his young bride, Eleanor. But tragedy struck within its walls. Eleanor died under mysterious circumstances, and Samuel, consumed by grief and madness, vanished soon after. For over a century, Wingate House sat abandoned, a looming presence at the edge of the forest. Locals spoke in hushed tones about strange lights in its windows and the sound of piano music drifting on the wind at night. Despite the warnings, the house became a magnet for thrill-seekers and ghost hunters. In the fall of 2003, a group of paranormal investigators decided to document the house. Led by seasoned investigator Mark, the team included his sister Emma, their tech-savvy friend Peter, and their cameraman, Jared. Unlike amateur ghost hunters, they came prepared, with high-tech equipment, thermal cameras, and voice recorders. The team arrived at dusk, parking their van at the overgrown driveway. The house loomed before them, its windows dark and hollow like empty eyes. The air around it was unnaturally still, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "This place gives me the creeps already," she muttered, clutching her jacket tighter. "That's why we're here," Mark said, trying to sound confident. "Let's see what's inside." The door, swollen with age, groaned loudly as they pushed it open. The interior was suffused with an eerie gloom, illuminated only by the faint orange glow of the setting sun filtering through cracked windows. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling. Peter set up the equipment in the grand foyer, where a massive staircase curved upward into darkness. "Thermal cameras online," he announced. "Let's see if we can find any cold spots." As they began their sweep, strange phenomena started almost immediately. Emma felt a sharp drop in temperature near the dining room, where a long table was still set with tarnished silverware and chipped porcelain plates. Peter's thermal camera confirmed it. There was a distinct cold spot hovering near the end of the table. "Looks like we've got something," Peter said, his voice tinged with excitement. Jared began filming, panning the camera across the room. Suddenly, he froze. "Did you guys hear that?" Everyone went silent, and then they heard it, a faint humming sound, soft and melodic, coming from the direction of the grand staircase. "It's a woman's voice," Emma whispered. Mark nodded. "Let's follow it." They ascended the stairs cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the thick shadows. The humming grew louder, leading them to a room at the end of the hallway. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a bedroom frozen in time. A massive four-poster bed dominated the room, its once luxurious bedding now moth-eaten and faded. A vanity table stood against the wall, its mirror cracked, and a music box sat on top, its lid slightly ajar. Mark approached the music box and turned the tiny crank. A haunting melody filled the air, identical to the humming they had heard. "Eleanor's room," Emma said softly, staring at a faded portrait on the wall. It depicted a beautiful young woman with sad eyes, her dark hair styled in cascading curls. Suddenly, Peter's EMF detector spiked, beeping wildly. "Something's here," he said, his voice trembling. The temperature plummeted, and the room grew oppressively quiet. Then, out of nowhere, the vanity mirror fogged over, as if someone were breathing on it. Slowly, letters began to appear, written by an invisible hand. "Help me," Emma gasped, stepping back. "What does it mean? Who's trying to communicate?" Before anyone could respond, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The team spun around, only to see that the doorknob was twisting violently, as if someone or something was trying to get in. "We need to leave. Now," Jared said, his voice shaking. But as they turned to flee, the music box began playing on its own, the melody warped and discordant. The room seemed to distort, the walls pulsing like a living entity. Then, in the corner of the room, a figure materialized. It was a woman, pale, ethereal, and unmistakably Eleanor from the portrait. Her dark eyes were filled with sorrow, but her presence exuded an overwhelming sense of dread. "You must leave," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. "He won't let you go." "Who?" Mark asked, his voice barely audible. Before Eleanor could answer, a deep, guttural growl reverberated through the room. The air grew heavy, and a shadowy figure began to form behind her, a towering, malevolent presence with burning red eyes. Eleanor's face twisted in terror. "Run!" she screamed, her voice piercing. The team bolted for the door, which flew open as if propelled by an unseen force. They raced down the staircase, the growling and crashing sounds of something inhuman pursuing them. They burst out of the house into the cool night air, collapsing on the overgrown lawn. When they looked back, the house was completely dark and silent, its windows blank and lifeless once more. The group vowed never to return, but the experience haunted them. In the weeks that followed, Peter began seeing Eleanor in his dreams, always mouthing the same words, "Help me." Mark tried to research the house further and discovered a chilling truth. Samuel Wingate had been obsessed with the occult, and after Eleanor's death, he performed rituals in the house, attempting to bring her back. Instead, he unleashed something darker, a malevolent force that trapped Eleanor's spirit and anyone who dared to enter. To this day, Wingate House remains abandoned, its secrets locked within. Locals say if you stand outside on a quiet night, you can hear the faint melody of a music box, accompanied by Eleanor's sorrowful whispers, "Help me." Story: The Torment of Ravenwood Estate. Deep in the Appalachian Hills stood Ravenwood Estate, a decaying mansion with a reputation that kept even the bravest away. Its story was one of madness, death, and inexplicable horrors. Built in 1890 by the reclusive Dr. Theodore Malgrave, the estate was meant to be a private retreat for his eccentric experiments. But when the townsfolk discovered that Theodore's research involved strange rituals and missing villagers, a mob stormed the estate. The doctor vanished without a trace, leaving the mansion behind as a monument to terror. Over the years, the estate became a source of countless eerie tales. Lights flickered in its windows at night, and screams were said to echo from its empty halls. Despite the warnings, it drew the attention of thrill-seekers and investigators, none of whom ever seemed quite the same afterward. In the fall of 2015, a documentary crew set out to uncover the truth about Ravenwood. The team consisted of Sarah, the fearless host, her cameraman Lucas, Claire, a historian, and Victor, a paranormal researcher. They were determined to spend 3 nights inside the mansion to document every unexplained event. The first night began with an ominous sign. As they approached the estate, their van stalled inexplicably. The air around the mansion was unnaturally still, with no sound of insects or wind. "This place is unsettling," Claire muttered, clutching her notebook. "It's perfect," Sarah replied, her excitement barely masking her unease. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of dark hallways and grand but decayed rooms. The team set up their base in the parlor, where an ornate fireplace dominated the space. Victor placed motion detectors and EMF readers throughout the house, while Lucas prepared his camera equipment. The first few hours passed uneventfully as the team explored. They found a study filled with old medical journals and a library whose shelves were lined with books on the occult. Sarah noticed a peculiar diary on a table. Its leather cover was cracked with age, and the name Theodore Malgrave was etched on the spine. Flipping through it, she found cryptic entries. "The veil grows thin. They whisper to me, promising power, but at what cost? I must continue." That night, the first signs of something unnatural occurred. As the team reviewed their footage, Lucas noticed movement in the background of one shot, a shadow that darted across the hall, though no one had been there. "Could it be an animal?" Claire suggested, but Victor shook his head. "That's no animal," he said. "Look at the shape. It's humanoid." Later, as they prepared to sleep, strange noises echoed through the mansion. Scratching sounds, faint whispers, and the distant slam of a door. Lucas set his camera to record as the team tried to rest, but sleep proved elusive. Around 3 a.m., Sarah awoke to the sound of creaking floorboards. She turned to see a figure standing at the far end of the room. It was tall and shrouded in darkness, its outline barely visible. "Lucas," she whispered, nudging him awake. But when he turned on his flashlight, the figure was gone. By morning, the atmosphere in the house had grown heavier, as if the mansion itself resented their presence. Victor's motion detectors began to go off sporadically, always in empty rooms. The team decided to investigate the basement, a place locals claimed was the source of the house's evil. The stairs creaked under their weight as they descended into the damp, musty cellar. The air was thick with the stench of decay. At the far end of the basement, they found an iron door, rusted but intact. "It's locked," Victor said, examining it. Sarah noticed strange symbols carved into the door, intricate runes that seemed to pulsate faintly. "What is this?" she asked. "It's a seal," Victor said, his voice grave. "A barrier. Whatever's behind this door. Someone wanted to keep it locked away." As if in response, a loud guttural growl emanated from the other side. The sound was inhuman, primal, and filled with rage. "Let's get out of here," Claire whispered, backing away. But as they turned to leave, the iron door began to rattle violently. The growls grew louder, and the basement lights flickered before going out completely. In the pitch black, Sarah screamed as something cold and sharp grazed her arm. Lucas's camera captured only flashes of chaos. The team running, shadows darting, and what appeared to be glowing red eyes in the darkness. They scrambled up the stairs and barricaded themselves in the parlor. Sarah's arm was bleeding, 3 long scratches running down her forearm. "What was that?" she gasped. Victor shook his head. "Something ancient, something angry." The team decided to leave immediately, but the mansion wasn't finished with them. As they gathered their equipment, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The walls seemed to close in, and the temperature dropped sharply. Suddenly, the fireplace roared to life, flames shooting high and casting long, distorted shadows. The shadows began to move, separating from their sources and creeping toward the team. "It's the house," Victor shouted. "It's alive." They bolted for the front door, but it slammed shut before they could reach it. The shadows closed in, enveloping them in a suffocating darkness. When the team awoke, they were lying outside the mansion, the sun just beginning to rise. Their equipment was gone, and their van started without issue. But the experience left its mark. Sarah, once fearless, refused to speak of Ravenwood. Lucas abandoned his career, claiming he was haunted by nightmares of glowing red eyes. Claire spent the rest of her life researching the mansion's history, only to vanish mysteriously on a solo trip to the estate. Victor, the only one who continued his work, left a final note before disappearing. "Ravenwood isn't just haunted, it's cursed, and it's waiting for its next visitors." To this day, the mansion stands as a testament to its dark history. Those who dare approach claim to hear faint whispers carried on the wind, calling them inside. Story: The Curse of Briar Hollow Church. Briar Hollow Church stood in isolation at the edge of a dense forest, its crumbling steeple barely visible through the towering oaks. Once a place of worship for a small colonial settlement in the 1700s, it was abandoned after a series of sinister events. Locals whispered of strange rituals conducted by the congregation's leader, Reverend Elias Grayson, who claimed to have found a way to speak to the other side. In 1784, the entire congregation disappeared overnight, leaving the church eerily intact but coated in ash, as though a fire had burned without consuming the wood. From that day on, Briar Hollow was left to rot, a forbidden place avoided by all. In the autumn of 2021, 3 friends, Lila, Daniel, and Mia, decided to investigate the church for a documentary on haunted locations. Equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and courage bolstered by curiosity, they set out on Halloween night, determined to uncover the truth. The forest was unnaturally quiet as they approached the church. A heavy mist clung to the ground, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The wooden door groaned as Daniel pushed it open, revealing the dark interior. The pews were overturned, the altar scorched, and the walls bore cryptic symbols carved deep into the wood. "What the hell are these?" Mia asked, tracing one of the carvings with her flashlight. "They look like runes," Lila said, her voice shaky, "but I've never seen anything like them before." Daniel set up the camera while Mia and Lila explored. In the corner of the room, Lila found a weathered journal partially buried under debris. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible, but one passage stood out. "We opened the door, and something answered. It is not of God. It is not of this world. May He have mercy on us." As she read the words aloud, a sudden chill swept through the church, extinguishing their flashlights. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang. "Did you feel that?" Mia whispered, her breath visible in the frigid air. Before anyone could respond, a faint, rhythmic chanting began to echo through the church. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Is someone out there?" Daniel called, his voice trembling. The chanting grew louder, and the symbols on the walls began to glow faintly. Shadows danced across the room, though there was no source of light. One by one, the friends' equipment malfunctioned, cameras flickering, recorders emitting static, and flashlights dying altogether. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall, cloaked, and featureless, its presence suffocating. The chanting stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. "Run!" Lila whispered, grabbing Mia's arm. But as they turned to flee, the pews began to shift, sliding across the floor to block their path. The figure raised a skeletal hand, pointing directly at them, and the air filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. "You brought us back," a voice rasped, guttural and inhuman. "Now you must stay." The friends scrambled toward a side door, forcing it open and tumbling into the misty forest. The chanting resumed, louder and more frenzied, as if pursuing them. They ran blindly through the trees, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding. When they finally reached their car, they discovered deep claw marks gouged into the metal, and the engine refused to start. They were forced to abandon it and hike back to town in the dark. The next day, the friends returned with local authorities, but the church was gone. In its place was an empty clearing, the ground charred black as if scorched by fire. Weeks later, Daniel began hearing whispers in his home, and Lila reported waking up with strange symbols etched into her skin. Mia disappeared entirely, her abandoned car found near the site of the church. Briar Hollow Church was never seen again, but locals say that on Halloween night, the chanting can still be heard echoing through the forest, calling to those foolish enough to listen. And so, another chapter of terror comes to a close, leaving us with the chilling reminder that some places are better left forgotten. Whether it's the whispers in the walls or the shadows that never seem to fade, haunted houses hold their secrets close, and those who dare to uncover them often pay the ultimate price. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed tonight's tale of terror, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more spine-chilling stories. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, sometimes it's not the house that's haunted, it's what's waiting inside.